Hello, I'm David Johnson, and welcome to the next episode of JP200 as we celebrate the Bicentennial of Jefferson Parish. I'm the Director of Marketing and Engagement at the Jefferson Parish Library, and I'm so pleased to have with me today a historian who's going to give us a full overview of the history of the parish, Dr. Charles Chamberlain.
Yeah,
welcome.
Thank you, David, for having me.
And Dr. Chamberlain is a professor at the University of New Orleans. He was a former curator at the Louisiana State Museum, and he has taught classes specifically on the history of Jefferson Parish for the Friends of the Cabildo. He also has a new book coming out this fall about the history of New Orleans, and we really can't talk about Jefferson Parish without talking about New Orleans. And of course, we know the parish was founded in 1825.
Yep.
But we're going to go back way before that, before it was known as Jefferson Parish. And tell us about the earliest settlement patterns and such on this patch of land that we know so well.
Yeah, well, to go back, France, of course, founded the colony of La Louisiane in 1699 with Iberville arriving here with his group of people from French Canada. And in his journals, he talks about coming to, the first mention of Jefferson Parish is the Camp Brûlé, which is where Kenner is. And so that was a region of the riverbanks were covered in the river cane, which really no longer exists, but it was prevalent throughout the American South. And then the local Indians, who were most likely the Acolapissa, basically would burn sections of the cane to establish basically a small settlement where Rivertown is today. So Rivertown is really the oldest documented settlement site. And then when Bienville founded New Orleans, he then gave out land concessions, and this would be 1718 and the few years afterwards that. And so the first land concessions that were given were just upriver in the area known as the Tchoupitoulas Coast, and then also the Camp Brûlé area. And so the Tchoupitoulas Coast was the area basically between Oxnard and where we are here today in Elmwood. So historic site. And what is very interesting is he gave a big grant to Claude Dubray and then the three Chauvin brothers who were French Canadian. Dubray was from Dijon, France. And so this area was developed as really kind of the first major plantation development upriver from New Orleans. And Dubray and the Chauvin brothers were known for actually building the first levees, which is very important.
Yes.
And they also built kind of the first industries in terms of indigo plants, and they built ranches with cattle. And so indigo was the primary crop at that time. And they used enslaved labor, so they really kind of set the template for plantation society in South Louisiana, all right here in Elmwood, Harahan area.
Yes, and of course it's still very, very much about business. And Camp Brûlé, that means burnt cane.
Yeah, Camp Brûlé, burnt cane, exactly,
right.
Yeah.
So, as I understand, of course, when Jefferson Parish was carved out, it included a fair amount of what we now know of as New Orleans, of course.
Yeah.
So describe how those boundaries were defined.
Yeah, so
in that era.
Great question. So it's kind of a give and take in terms of territory. But in 1812, when Louisiana gained statehood, and it basically had a number of parishes, much fewer than today. I think there were 12 initially. But anyway, Jefferson was then created in the second wave in 1825. So hence Jefferson Parish 200, the 200th anniversary of Jefferson founding. And basically the boundary went all the way down to what was then the upriver border of New Orleans, which is Felicity Street in New Orleans. Many people know that where the Walmart is on Tchoupitoulas, right? So anything above Felicity was Jefferson Parish.
Right.
And so what happened was, as New Orleans was growing, it basically just began gobbling up land and moving the parish line further forward. So they took over the city of Lafayette, which is where the Garden District and the Irish Channel are today, in 1852. And so the parish line moved to, I'm not entirely sure, but say Louisiana Avenue today in New Orleans. And then in 1872, they took over Carrollton, and that's when the current parish line moved all the way up to where it is today.
Yes, and
so
parish government for Jefferson Parish was based in Gretna.
Yeah,
it's still there.
Exactly,
of course.
And originally, the county seat or the parish seat was Lafayette, the Garden District, and then they moved it to Carrollton, And then when New Orleans took over Carrollton, that's when they said, we're going to the West Bank and we're staying there.
The parish was obviously kind of rather slow to develop in those years. It was very rural, very agricultural.
Yeah.
What were the early kind of settlements, so to speak, in that area?
Yeah, so the two biggest settlements initially were Kennerville, which is Kenner, and that was established by Stephen Minor Kenner, I believe, was the founder of that, and that was part of the Kenner family. The father moved down from Virginia. He was a founder of the Episcopalian Church, so he represented that very American Protestant culture coming to Creole, Louisiana. And then Duncan and Stephen were the two sons. So Stephen owned the plantation where Kenner is today. And then Duncan owned a number of plantations further upriver. He actually married into the Brangier family, one of the wealthiest Creole families in the river parishes, and they owned a number of very large plantations. So when he married into them, he eventually actually bought them out after the Civil War when they failed financially. And so Duncan became really one of the most powerful men in the States at that time. And then on the West Bank, Gretna was the other big community, and that was established in the site of Pierre d'Urbigny, his plantation called Gretna Green. So at that time, the West Bank was predominantly rural. Gretna and a small town called Mechanicam, which is a German settlement, were really the kind of the two suburbs outside of New Orleans on the West Bank. So Gretna was the big town at that time.
Right.
So,
and it still, of course, has an old historic core.
yeah, exactly. No, old Gretna is great.
Yes. I thought it was interesting. Thomas Jefferson was alive when they named this parish after him. And I always wondered if he knew. He was obviously a very elderly man at that time.
Yeah.
It's
a good question. I would love to know that.
Yeah, I'll have to find that. So, you spoke about the Civil War, of course. We know there's one landmark here in the parish, Camp Parapet, which the Jefferson Historical Society maintains. And can you tell us about the role of that?
Yeah, so it's on the Civil War era maps, and especially there's a map by Nathaniel Banks called The Defenses of New Orleans. And so it's a really incredible map of a footprint of the entire metro area, including large sections of Jefferson Parish. So Camp Parapet is on there, and basically it was built to be a Confederate defense of the city of New Orleans and Orleans Parish, essentially from upriver. And then when the Union occupied New Orleans beginning in 1862, they took it over. And so then it became basically a Union stronghold. And they had a line of defense that basically went up La Barre and that area, so parallel with Causeway Boulevard today. And also what is interesting about Camp Parapet is when the Union began occupying that area, African-American people from the surrounding area self-emancipated themselves and then arrived at Camp Parapet as officially contraband by law, meaning they were basically, possessed property by the Union. And then eventually the process of emancipation took hold over the next couple years.
Of course, and we're going to fast forward to post-war America. That's really when so much of Jefferson Parish, as we know it today, came into being.
Yeah.
What were the catalysts that spurred that suburban development? Of course, it wasn't just unique to Metro New Orleans, but a nationwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
But what was happening?
Well, I think what you find is, at least before World War II, people are already settling along the River Ridge, where Jefferson is today, where Oxon are in that area, and also along Metairie Ridge, which was Metairie Bayou at that time. So Metairie Bayou, it's a distributary of Bayou St. John, and it had its headwaters where New Orleans Museum of Art is today, and then it extended all the way along City Park Boulevard and into Metairie Road. And so the curvy features of Metairie Road are a result of that winding bayou. And so after World War II, what you find is that the rest of the parish then develops as modern suburbia. And part of this is just the general expansion of the population. In 1960, at its peak, New Orleans had about 600,000 people. But between 1950 and 1960, Jefferson Parish doubled in size. It gained about 150,000 people. So a lot of people were already moving to Jefferson Parish. And then in the 1960s, suburbia just really explodes throughout the whole area. By this time, you have the Causeway that's built. You have Veterans Boulevard that's been built. Lakeside Mall is built in around 62, I think. So it's all coming together right in that same time period. And it's quite remarkable. I show in images that are based on the Jefferson Parish Review, which is this magazine put out by the Parish Chamber of Commerce in the post-World War II years. But really, you can just see the entire area that, but in 1945, it was all marshland or cut over cypress swamp. By 1970, it's all completely filled in.
Yes.
So just a really remarkable 25, 30-year period of growth.
And of course, there were a lot of federal initiatives that were helping to do that. The GI Bill,
yes,
of course, which allowed for low interest loans for returning servicemen
right,
to buy homes. The Interstate Highway Act,
yes,
obviously the development of Interstate 10.
yeah.
What were some of the early developments and such, and how did this pattern begin? Was there any zoning? I guess.
Well, I don't think there was any zoning actually. Not that I have determined, but I will say that the idea of someone who grew up in, say, a shotgun house in New Orleans and grew up with no plumbing, perhaps, or using an outhouse and no yard, and then especially returning veterans after World War II coming home to the GI Bill, which allowed easy financing for new construction, so you could buy a nice ranch-style house in Metairie with a big yard, a big backyard, and modern brick house with plumbing. And so it was just a huge shift in the standard of living for anyone who was able to make that jump. And it's kind of funny, now people have really appreciation for historic homes, old wooden homes, but back in those days, the modern slab ranch style brick house was the goal of many, many people. So.
Oh yes, I've seen advertisements for Tarrytown, and I think the typeface couldn't be any larger that says air conditioning. Which,
that's another one, right?
Which was very difficult to retrofit those old homes.
Yeah.
In New Orleans.
Yeah.
But in your research, was there any difficulty in infrastructure keeping pace with all this new development? Obviously, a community requires schools, libraries.
Well, I think the West Bank probably had the biggest traffic problems. If you see images from the 70s on the West Bank Expressway, it was not an expressway. Coming into the city with a toll back in those days,
yes.
You were stuck in traffic backed all the way up for miles, And Metairie also, faced similar issues in terms of coming into New Orleans, as it still does. One funny story that I do relate is from 1803 from the French colonial prefect, Pierre Clément de Lassat, who was sent here by Napoleon to take over Louisiana from France. He ended up giving it to the United States, but he comes out to a sporting event in Metairie, and he talks about the long line of traffic on Metairie Road. So I always say traffic in Metairie has always been.
Before there was a railroad crossing as well.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean that's part of life in the suburbs.
Yeah.
I think for all the conveniences, there's also inconveniences that come with that. Now, you talked about, old Metairie in particular. That was kind of one of the earliest suburban developments.
Yeah, it was.
In the 1920s.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And, wealthy
as
well. I mean, beautiful homes.
So I think people with money from Orleans Parish, when they wanted to, expand into suburbia, the Metairie Ridge was a natural outlet for that. And so Old Metairie developed at that time. And you can see architecturally the design of the older homes date from that period. Even some of the old shotguns had that arts and crafts look along the ridge. And then some of the larger homes really are, quite beautiful from that time period as well, the 1920s, 30s.
Now, we also know that it wasn't all just a squeaky clean, Leave It to Beaver world. There was also some diversions and entertainment that developed and some mafia activity on the way as well. Tell us about that period of Jefferson Parish history.
Well, I would describe that as the Frank Clancy period when he was sheriff, and he started out in Kenner, and then basically he ran a wide open parish for the day. And so it's kind of funny to think about it now, but people from Orleans Parish went to Jefferson Parish to go have a good time. And so at that time, the parish line, there were a number of nightclubs and gambling establishments. Southport Hall, O'Dwyer's, Suburban Gardens, those are kind of the top, and the Forest Club, another fourth one. And so they hosted like entertainment. And even as early as the 1930s, Louis Armstrong was playing at Suburban Gardens. It's quite incredible. But people would come to gamble in Jefferson Parish, and Clancy ran it as a wide open establishment where you could do slot machines. And then what happened was in the 1950s, the Congressional Investigation Committee, the Kefauver committee, called him in and basically accused him of running racketeering. And so after that, he became a reformer and swore off gambling, and Jefferson Parish, I guess, became boring.
Casinos took a lot longer to return. I believe by the 1990s when they were legally sanctioned, of course. But for the most part, though, this area developed obviously along racial lines. But there were black communities.
Yeah, there were.
That existed in Jefferson Parish.
Yeah. Shrewsbury is one of the oldest one, and Shrewsbury has produced some amazing musical products and musical people. So Bebe Ridgely, the jazz musician from the 1920s who had a big orchestra in town, he came from Shrewsbury. His grandson, Tommy Ridgely, was still kind of a prominent blues musician back in the 70s and 80s. And then I think the biggest family is the Marsalis family.
Yes.
So Ellis and his 4 sons. So Ellis Marsalis passed away recently during COVID, but Wynton Marsalis and Branford and Delfio and the drummer, I can't remember his name.
There's so many Marsalises, it's hard for me to keep track of them as well. But I know there's a historic marker now.
Yeah, there is, the Marsalis Mansion.
Right. Yeah. That was a motel that catered to black travelers.
Yeah, exactly.
This was in the Green Book. When that was a common guide. As well. You're talking about the traffic and such. Addressing quality of life issues out here. What kind of developments have come in more recent years, I guess, to improve that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of funny when you look at the images of when Veterans Highway was first developed, and especially the intersection of Veterans and Causeway. I love these images, and it was just a simple stop sign, and
Yes, it's considerably more complex now, to say the least.
Right. But I would say, interestingly, one of it's a complex intersection, but Jefferson Parish designed it with great foresight, and that is Airline and Causeway.
Yes.
So there's actually an elevated roundabout on that intersection if you're trying to travel on Causeway and go up or down river. So no traffic lights, all just ramps. Traffic flows smoothly all the time through there. So I say that's really a very modern idea to have basically a roundabout intersection at a very busy one that could potentially be, a big pain like Veterans and Causeway today.
Yes. No, it does seem the engineers seem to have really, like you said, some foresight on that. Coming up into more modern history, we know, of course, Jefferson Parish played an integral role during Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
The fact that this side of the levee system did not collapse.
Yeah.
Of course, there was flooding in portions of the parish, but it really was the anchor that allowed the city to rebuild. The fact that the retail, especially, was able to stay afloat, and that the rescue missions were so often based on the interchanges, the ones we see behind us. Actually, can you give us a little history about that area?
Well, yeah, because Jefferson was not as affected by Katrina. Of course, we know the history of Aaron Broussard sending the pump operators home for their safety, and what that did is, of course, caused flooding on the south side of Metairie Ridge and also along the lake where the rainwater is built up. But the area around Lakeside Mall, Causeway, and I-10 was a big staging area for people evacuating and also for first responders. So that was huge. And I will say overall that, historically, I think when people move to Jefferson Parish, they see it very different from Orleans Parish, and there's been a historic rivalry over the years, including the back and forth of the territories. But really, when it comes down to it, we all have this appreciation for each other in common. And so Jefferson Parish really showed their true colors during Katrina by helping out the recovery. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And, so many of the cultural traditions that took root in New Orleans, it's known for being a city that cherishes ethnic pride and celebration, have, of course, migrated into Jefferson Parish.
Yeah.
Large Irish-Italian parade,
Right.
of course, St. Joseph's Day
Yeah.
altars. Would you care to comment about that phenomenon?
Yeah, sure. I think that if you go to the Irish Italian parade today, it's really one of the most authentic experiences of local culture that you can find in the metro area. So it's really cool that represents those two very interesting and vibrant cultural communities, and the people that come out and see it. It's the real deal. So if you really want to experience true New Orleans area culture, those parades are great.
Yes, and very much, like I said, a manifestation of a great, amazing ethnic mix.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the more recent ethnic arrivals in Jefferson Parish were the Vietnamese.
That's right.
Because they've taken a very strong role in the community.
Yeah.
Can you describe that history?
Well, yeah. Basically, what happened was Archbishop Hannon went to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas in 1975 at the end of the Vietnam War, and then approached Vietnamese people at the refugee camp there, and he said, if you want to settle in a place that has a historic Catholic community and environmentally is very similar to the south of Vietnam's with marshes and bayous and rice and also a French cooking heritage as well, New Orleans is a great place. And so really that was when the first Vietnamese arrived in the city area. And it also brings up the fact that in the 1950s even, you have Chinese families moving out here. The Lee family, of course, is the most well-known. And so House of Lee was an institution on Veterans Highway back then in the 50s, all the way to its closure in, I think, the 80s, late 80s. Or no, maybe early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to go there.
Really?
I moved here, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
And so Harry Lee, of course, becomes sheriff, a larger-than-life figure, and then Cynthia Lee Shang is the parish president today. So,
yes.
That's another very interesting history overall. And, I knew people that knew Harry back when he lived in Chinatown in New Orleans, back in the 1940s. So,
Child, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So he worked at the family restaurant then.
Yes.
So,
yes. Well, it is the most ethnically diverse of all of Louisiana's parishes.
That doesn't surprise me.
According to the census records.
Yeah.
And continues to be a very welcoming place for people who are migrating into the area for the first time.
Sure.
What do you think of the future of Jefferson Parish? I mean, obviously, it's
good question.
it's very interesting in the sense that you have this large suburban cluster, on both sides of the Mississippi River. Then much of the parish, as you go south, is water.
Yeah.
With the communities of Lafitte and then Grand Isle. Maybe we could touch a bit on those communities too.
Yeah, no, it's the geography of the parish is fascinating, going all the way down to the coast in Grand Isle. And, a lot of people don't realize that it has that long, skinny layout. But certainly in the future, we're going to face so many challenges in terms of dealing with hurricanes and also flood mitigation and just generally sustainability. So I often ask the question, in New Orleans, where are you going to celebrate the Quadricentennial in 2118? And in Jefferson Parish, where are you going to celebrate the Tricentennial in 2125, right? Are we going to be able to do it here? Hopefully, right? But, with land loss predictions by the state, basically the environmental groups called Coastal 2050, when they show maps, it shows this region like a little finger sticking out in the Gulf.
Yes.
So I have a feeling it will be a challenge for a lot of people to maintain their lifestyle if water keeps encroaching in on the natural ridge of the river. So certainly Grand Isle's already facing these challenges. People in Lafitte are already facing these challenges. The question is, when is it going to come to this area along the natural ridge of the river, this naturally elevated area? And then who will be able to afford to stay here? So I encourage people and planners just in the metro area, again, to think about sustainability and the idea of living with water and sustainable architecture, which is going to be expensive, but if people want to stay here, that's got to happen.
Yes, yes. Well, so many lessons to learn from history,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah, sure.
for the conversation today and shedding light on the history of this parish, 200 years
Yeah,
officially, and of
I know it's hard to believe, right?
yes,
Seems like
predates that,
yesterday.
of course. And we, of course, encourage all of you to come to the Jefferson Parish Libraries, all 16 branches. If you want to learn more about the parish history, we have a great lecture series coming up throughout the year, and of course, many, many books, including Dr. Chamberlain's book about the history of Jefferson Parish. Thank you.